In my previous video, I talked about one of the main concerns of my novel, which is that you have a thing called justice, which is an abstract concept, which is then enshrined by a codified set of laws, which are sort of underpinning this notion of justice. And that those laws then lead to a legal judicial system of courts where you have material evidence being very heavily leaned on in order to prove law breaking and therefore an act of injustice. And that sort of scale from the abstract concept of justice through a codified set of laws through to material evidence. And they're not the same language at all. They're not even operating at the same level. You've gone from abstract all the way down to materiality. But I wanted to consider the aspects of that materiality in two spheres. One is the material witness, and the other is material evidence. So the human eyewitnesses are called material if they are absolutely key to the case, such as if someone saw the accused with a gun in their hand, or they saw the accused driving the getaway car. They are taken to be of a higher value than other witnesses who contribute sort of backstory and background. So they might not have seen it with their own eyes, but they can rule out certain things, such as a work colleague who says, no, the accused was not at work with me at that time. But as technology has advanced, the material witness is not a human eye or a human ear so much as a spectroscope or magnetic image resonance or DNA testing, which are taken to be far more clinching evidence than the unreliable nature of a human witness. And I want to consider both of those two aspects, the human witness and the material evidence. So human beings, whenever their eyes are scanning the field in front of them, they're only using 85% of what they take in to report back to the brain. And the reason for that is that the other 85% is what one would expect to see there. It's only the 15% that's worth analysing to see if there's anything out of place. And that's particularly germane in a court case where a dead body with blood coming from it, from a gunshot wound, is out of place. It's out of the ordinary. And it's often why when people report first coming across dead bodies, they think they're mannequins, because they're so out of the ordinary and they're so out of place, and we're so shielded from death on a daily basis, that they look more like a tailor's dummy than a human being. And yet a tailor's dummy lying abandoned on a road is, rather than being upright in a tailor shop window, is even less likely than a human body. So the nature of human sight is that it's a foreshortening, it's a filtering system, as I say, of only about 50% of what it sees. Now, going back to the 85% that it sort of filters out as natural and normal, how have we come by that to define it as normal, to define it as reality, to define it as what you would expect to see? Well, that's come through evolution. So when we were on the plains with tall grasses, and you'd see a motion amongst the grass, and the eye has to sort of pick out patterns to see, is it a predatory tiger stalking you as prey, or is it an antelope which you can in turn hunt for dinner? But the fact that evolution has brought us to this place of filtering out 85% means that it's an inheritance that we have as third persons. It's not hardwired, but it's fed to us as we develop from babies into this 85% is what reality is constituted of. And we accept it, as I say, as a third person body of knowledge or perception. Rather, we can make little inroads as to our own sort of first person interpretations of that. But basically, as a species, we inherit this from our evolutionary ancestors. And in a similar way, the body of science, of forensics, is a third-person body of knowledge given to the jury, in that it's made up of very specialist knowledge that lies beyond the ken of the jury's everyday experiences, probably the judge as well, because the judge is only there really to interpret matters of law, not matters of evidence. And there's a fair chance that the barristers themselves don't fully understand all the nuances of the science. So juries, as first-person individuals, the right to a trial by your peers, are sat in the jury box being fed all this third person expertise of science, which they have no real way of understanding intuitively and in their own right. They either accept it as it seems to make sense to them, or they don't. What they do respond to as first persons is the look and the behaviour of the accused, or if the motivation is revenge or jealousy, they can probably relate to that as in a first person way. Even if they haven't experienced it directly, they understand it as a human motivation, far removed from the science, which they can't. So there are all sorts of problems in both what the eyewitness sees, because that's unreliable in terms of recall, in terms of interpretation, but also the material evidence itself is this sort of abstruse body of knowledge fed to a jury who have to accept it on trust, even if there are competing expert witnesses, one for the defence, one for the prosecution. How do the jury weigh up what these two sets of experts are throwing at them? But the book also goes on to a much wider questioning of the nature of materiality itself, that yes, forensic science contains an awful lot of, through say ballistics, what gun was used from the shell that they found at the crime scene, and once you've got the gun, then you could trace its sort of ownership path, and it may very well lead you to the accused. But the nature of matter itself is not being established. The scientists will tell you it has, that there is a material world objectively underpinned, but things like quantum mechanics and the nature of field theory, so that you get discrete units of matter which have their mass of their own, also can exist as part of a wider field, and it's only the observer's act of choosing, or in this case the detectives and the forensics act of choosing, that shard of metal is important in the investigation because it represents some shrapnel from the murder weapon. So they have changed it from field to discrete object, and quantum mechanics would suggest that that's not an automatic process. That there's a subjective element to that the mere decision taken by the observing eye of the detective or of the forensics team that item is important manifests that item out of its field. So my book is looking at the crime scene very much as a field, and the detective and the forensics team are picking objects and changing the nature of the whole field. So that's one of the things that my book is looking at and questioning, the whole sort of material evidence base of our justice system.